Hello dear friends, this is your personal English coach Divyam here, and in this video we are going to study a wonderful short story written by O. Henry, which is known as Hearts and Hands. I'm making this video on demand basis because one of the students had requested that I make a video on this wonderful short story in my previous video tutorials, so here I am with the explanation. Let's begin with the first paragraph. At Denver, there was an influx of passengers into the coaches on the eastbound B&M Express. So Denver is the name of the station. There was an influx. Influx is nothing but flow or rush of passengers. Passengers are people into the coaches on the eastbound. Eastbound is a train going in the east direction. Which train are they referring to here? B&M Express. In one coach, there sat a very pretty young woman dressed in elegant taste and surrounded by all the luxurious comforts of an experienced traveler. So, there was a one coach in which there was a beautiful young woman who looked very nice and elegant, means beautiful, and she had all the comforts that the train can provide for an experienced traveler. So the person who is traveling very frequently, he might need say for example a charger, a fan, a newspaper, a table, and all the comforts were there in the train. Among the newcomers were two young men, one of handsome presence with a bold, frank countenance and manner, and the other a ruffled, plum-faced person, heavily built and roughly dressed. The two were handcuffed together. So, as we know, many people got into the coach B&M Express, and there were two newcomers, two new people who got into the train. They were young, and one looked very handsome and attractive with a bold presence and frank countenance and manner. He was an honest person and looked very strong and straightforward, while the other looked a little sad and depressed, and he had a little bit of heavy muscles and his dress was rough. And what is the scenario here? Both of them were tied with one handcuff. So one handcuff was in one person's hand and the other half was in another person's hand. As they passed down the aisle of the coach, the only vacant seat offered was a reversed one facing the attractive young woman, which means that, already there was a young woman sitting, an attractive, beautiful lady sitting, and right in front of that lady, facing that lady in a reverse direction, there were seats which were vacant, and they were the only seats vacant in that coach. So the two people who just got into the train, they sat in front of that particular lady. Here the link couple seated themselves. So couple is the two men. The young woman's glance fell upon them with a distant, swift disinterest, which means the young woman, because the two men just came into the coach, the young woman saw them. She was not really interested in them, but still she saw them at a distance. Then with a lovely smile brightening her countenance and a tender pink tingeing her round cheeks, she held out a little grey-gloved hand, which means as soon as she saw them, her face became bright and her cheeks became pink, and after that she held out her hand on which she was wearing grey gloves. When she spoke, her voice, full, sweet and deliberate, proclaimed that its owner was accustomed to speak and be heard. So this means she started speaking. The sentence means she started speaking, and when she spoke, its owner, whose owner? The voice's owner. So it's the lady herself. So the lady herself had a habit of speaking and hearing what other people say. So here is the lady speaking. Well, Mr. Easton, If you make me speak first, I suppose I must. Don't you ever recognize old friends when you meet them in the West? So now we know that out of the two males that entered the coach, one of them was Mr. Easton, and she identifies that person as Mr. Easton, and she asks him, if you will make me speak first, I suppose I must. So this means that ideally Easton should recognize her and speak, but she says, if you will make me speak first. So because he is not speaking, and the lady assumes that Easton has identified her, but still he is not speaking, so she says, you will make me speak first. Don't you ever recognize old friends when you meet them in the West? So she says, is this a habit of yours to recognize people and don't speak at all? The younger man roused himself sharply, which means he was a little bit awakened on hearing her voice, and the sound of her voice seemed to struggle with slight embarrassment, which he threw off instantly. So you can imagine the situation. There is a prisoner traveling on the train, and when you are heading towards a prison, you don't feel like talking to anyone. And this man, he was awakened by this young and beautiful lady, and he was embarrassed when he heard her voice once, and he just shed off the embarrassment on hearing her voice. And the lady took her right hand out, but the man had handcuffs in the right hand. So what he did is he pulled out his left hand and clasped her fingers. So you can imagine the situation when somebody puts forward their right hand for a handshake. You should pull out your right hand, only then you can handshake. But what happened here? The lady forwarded her right hand and the man forwarded his left. So with his left hand he clasped her fingers. It's Miss Fairchild, he said with a smile. I'll ask you to excuse the other hand. It's otherwise engaged just at present. So the man now identified the woman and named her. It's Miss Fairchild, and he smiled. And then he asks the woman to excuse the right hand. Why? Because he said that the right hand was busy at the moment. Why it was busy? Because it had handcuffs on it. He slightly raised his right hand, bound at the wrist by shining bracelet to the left one of his companion. So why it was busy, he is revealing now. He just raised his right hand and showed the bracelet like thing, and that bracelet was tied to his companion. That's what he showed the women. The glad look in the girl's eyes slowly changed to bewildered horror. So now Miss Fairchild, she realized that something's not right because these guys are having handcuffs. So all the excitement, the joy, the delightful face turned into confused horror. The glow faded from her cheeks. Her lips parted in vague, relaxing distress. Meaning, all the glow, all the light from her face, it went off. Also from her cheeks, the pinkness, it went off. Her lips parted in vague. So whenever you are in shock, your mouth gets opened. So similarly, her lips parted in vague means unclear and relaxing distress. So a lot of confusion, depression and sadness came upon her face. Easton, with a little laugh, as if amused, was about to speak again when the other forestalled him. So Easton was about to speak. So the man whom the lady was talking to was again about to speak, but he was stopped by the other person. So the other person interrupted him. Forestall is nothing but delayed his speech. The glum-faced man had been watching the girl's countenance with the veiled glances from his keen, shrewd eyes. So the glum face is sad-faced man who was sitting beside the first one, or sitting beside Easton. He was watching everything. He was watching the girl's face with veiled glances. So veil is covered. So It's like secretly watching the young girl from his sharp eyes. And he started speaking. "You will excuse me for speaking, miss, but I see you are acquainted with the marshal here." So he lets the lady know that the person with whom she was talking to is a marshal. "If you'll ask him to speak a word for me when we get to the pen, he'll do it, and it will make things easier for me there. He's taking me to Leavenworth prison. It's 7 years of counterfeiting." So the other man tells the lady that if you ask him to speak a word for me when we get to the pen is actually prison here. Pen is a room, a closed room. So the second one tells the lady that if you ask him to speak when we get to the prison, then he will speak and it will make things easier. "He's taking me to Leavenworth prison. It's 7 years of counterfeiting." So he tells the lady that it's the case of counterfeiting. What is counterfeiting? Counterfeiting is making duplicates. So it can be a duplicate product, it can be a duplicate currency, a duplicate song, but here they are referring to notes. So the second one tells the lady that it's a case of counterfeiting and he's taking me to Leavenworth prison. So the second one tells the lady that the first one was taking him to prison. "Oh," said the girl with a deep breath and returning color. "So that is what you're doing out there? Out here? A marshal?" So the lady is a little surprised and all her delight goes off and she takes a deep breath and she returns to her original emotions and she inquires the first one, Easton, and tells him if he was doing this kind of job, a job of a marshal in the West. She's a little surprised that the person that she knew was a marshal. "My dear Miss Fairchild," said Easton calmly, "I had to do something. Money has a way of taking wings unto itself, and you know it takes money to keep step with our crowd in Washington." Which means he says that I had to deal with money because in a place like Washington, if you want to be at par with or at the same level of the crowd in Washington, you have to deal with money. I saw this opening in the West, and well, a marshalship isn't quite as high a position as that of an ambassador, but so he says, I found this particular opening of a position in the West, and then I thought that marshalship, so being a marshal, it was not as high as an ambassador, as being an ambassador or representative, but then is interrupted by the girl again. So Easton starts telling the lady that money has wings, it can fly, money is such a matter, and if you want to be at the same level of the people with Washington, you need to deal with money. And then he talks about the position he saw in the West, and then he is referring the marshalship position, or he's comparing the position of marshalship with an ambassador. The ambassador, said the girl warmly, doesn't call anymore. He need not ever have done so. You ought to know that. And so now you are one of these dashing Western heroes, and you ride and shoot and go into all kind of dangers. That's different from Washington life. You have been missed from the old crowd. So the woman now knows that the person whom she knew earlier, Easton, was a marshal, and he was dealing with riding horses and shooting people and getting into dangers to trap the criminals. And she says that's not the kind of life which was there in Washington, and you have left everything in Washington to do this. You have left the luxurious Washington life to deal with danger. And she was a little bit inspired by Marshall, and that's why the girl's eyes, fascinated, went back, widening a little to rest upon the glittering handcuffs. So she was constantly staring at the handcuffs every now and then. "Don't you worry about them, miss," said the other man. "All marshals handcuff themselves to their prisoners to keep them from getting away. Mr. Easton knows his business." So these lines are spoken by the second man. He says, all the marshal in the West, what they do is they handcuff themselves to their prisoners so that they don't run away. So usually marshals, they handcuff themselves to avoid running away. And the second one insists that Mr. Easton knew what he was doing. "Will we see you again soon in Washington?" asked the girl. So she's asking both of them, and Easton is replying, "Not soon, I think. My butterfly days are over, I fear." Butterfly days are days when you have a lot of comfort and luxury and good things going on. So Easton says, "My good days are over, so I might not be in Washington again." "I love the West," said the girl irrelevantly. So now the girl shows her love for the West. She thinks that Easton is a marshal and he is dealing with danger and crime and doing all that stuff. So she also starts talking about the love for the West. Her eyes were shining. She looked away out the car window. She began to speak truly and simply without the gloss of style and manner. So now here the girl is reminiscent or nostalgic about the past, and she starts talking. "Mama and I spent the summer in Denver. She went home a week ago because father was slightly ill. I could live and be happy in the West. I think the air here agrees with me. Money isn't everything, but people always misunderstand things and remain stupid." So here we see that the young girl gets impressed by Marshall, and because Marshall was located in the West, she starts praising the West and says how the air was comfortable to her and how she has her own memories in the West. And then she says money isn't everything, but people always misunderstand things and remain stupid. So she doesn't like the fact that she's not in West anymore. "Say, Mr. Marshall," growled the glum-faced man. So now it's the turn of the sad or depressed man to start talking. He asks Easton. So he addresses him as Mr. Marshall. "This isn't quite fair. I'm needing a drink and I haven't had a smoke all day." So the glum-faced man, he's complaining Easton that it's been a long day since I have smoked a cigarette. "Haven't you talked long enough?" Which means, "It's enough. You've talked long enough. Now stop. Take me into the smoker now," which means take me to the smoking room, won't you? I'm half dead for a pipe, so I badly want to smoke. That's what the second one is insisting the first one, or he's actually complaining. The bound travelers rose to their feet, Easton with the same slow smile on his face. So those two people, they got up and went ahead to the smoke room to smoke a cigarette. Easton with the same slow smile on his face. So Easton was smiling as he got up. "I cannot deny a petition for tobacco," he said lightly. "It's the one friend of the unfortunate. Goodbye, Miss Fairchild. Duty calls, you know." He held out his hand for farewell. So Easton is bidding farewell to the young woman, and do you know the meaning of this line? "I cannot deny a petition"? The meaning of petition as stated by Google is make an appeal to. So if somebody requests for tobacco, if somebody is insisting to go get a smoke, Easton cannot deny. I cannot deny if someone asks for tobacco. It's the one friend of the unfortunate. So he says all the unfortunate people have this one friend, and that is tobacco. Goodbye, Miss Fairchild, duty calls. He held out his hand for farewell. So Marshall is telling the woman that okay, goodbye, it's my duty now to take this guy to smoke. It's too bad you're not going east, she said, reclothing herself with manner and style. But you must go on to Leavenworth, I suppose. So she says that you should come to east, it's a good place. And she, organizes herself with her own manner and style and etiquettes and gestures. But then she says, it will also be your duty to take this guy to Leavenworth prison. Easton says, yes, I must go on to Leavenworth. I must go to that prison. The two men sidled down the Aisle into the smoker. So it's not Aisle, even I pronounce it incorrectly. It's called aisle. Into the smoker. The two men slided down the aisle into the smoker. The two passengers in a seat nearby had heard most of the conversation, and said one of them. So you can imagine a scenario where these three people were sitting, the women and the two men who were handcuffed, and elsewhere the other people were sitting. So where the other people were sitting in that group, one of them said that Marshall's a good sort of chap. Some of these Western fellows are right. So he said that Easton was a nice guy, and that fellow said that some of the Western fellows are alright. That means they are all good, they are doing a good job. Pretty young to hold an office like that, isn't he? Asked the other. So there were two people apart from the three, and first one was questioning the second one, and the second one responded, Easton was too young to have a position of a marshal, isn't he? He's asking the first one again. And the first one said, young? Why? Oh, didn't you catch on? Say, did you ever know an officer to handcuff a prisoner to his right hand? So this is a twist of the whole story. Why? Because it's an irony. The glum-faced man whom we were referring to earlier is actually a marshal. Yes, the glum-faced man is actually a marshal, and he has extended his kindness and heart to his prisoner by pretending to be the convict who is going to prison. जो सेकंड आदमी था वो मार्शल था, और फर्स्ट वन ईस्टन जो वेमेन के साथ बात कर रहा था वो एक्चुअली प्रिजनर था. बट द मार्शल एक्सटेंडेड हिज काइंडनेस एंड हार्ट to his prisoner by pretending as a convict, यानी कि जो glum face man था उसने ऐसा acting किया criminal होने का. So this is the climax of the whole story. I hope you've understood this story. Interesting story. और O. Henry की stories ऐसी ही रहती है. There is always a twist in the end. If you have understood the story, do comment, like, and most importantly subscribe. और उससे भी इम्पॉर्टेंट ये है कि do let me know what you don't understand, and I will make a video tutorial just for you. Thank you, and I hope you have a wonderful day.